We were up with his group not too long ago. On Friday at 10:45 a.m., I'm going on Channel 4 with Dave Graber. And guns is going to be a major topic on that show. So I've got to always get to my happy place, but I can tell you, I'm not going to say anything to you tonight differently than I'm going to say to Dave Graber, who's going to show it on television. And my phone bank will light up at some point in time with some uneducated, unhappy, emotional people who get ginned up. So let me tell you, when I do interviews or when I'm trying to figure out exactly where I'm going to go with something, whether it's, lake levels on Ontario or in this case, Second Amendment rights. For me, it's pretty simple. I swore an oath to uphold and to defend the Constitution of the United States and to recognize that our founding fathers believe in states' rights with few exceptions. It's actually been too many. That's the happy place I start at which point they're going to dive right in and want to know about assault weapons, magazine capacity, red flag laws, you name it, that's where they're headed. So the other thing that I've come, when you have to think about this, and I've made this point to some pretty liberal groups, made them at least pause for a second. I said, let me ask you a question. When there is a drunk driving incident, and a drunk driver kills in a tragic manner a young family, do they talk about the car he's driving? Are they going after Ford Motor Company or General Motors? No, they're talking about the drunk driver. And when we pass laws relative to blood alcohol levels, drinking age and everything else, that was focused on the driver. Never once have I heard in a drunk driving situation anyone go after the automobile. I said, so what are we doing here? We have tragedy upon tragedy, mass shootings, and what do we talk about? Or what do the liberals want to talk about? The gun. And in fact, it's not the gun. If it's not an AR-15, they don't even want to know about it. So I've said, if we don't focus on the shooter, like we focus on the drunk driver, we're never going to come to any solutions. We're focused in the wrong place. Now, why are we focused there? Because it's a political soundbite. It's suggesting a simple answer. And the public today is so busy. Everyone is busy with their own problems. We have aging parents, we have kids that maybe have boomeranged back, we have health issues, we have financial issues, marital issues, you name it. And so people are very busy. And no one wants to see a tragedy. A mass shooting at Walmart, 20-some people are killed. But also don't forget, guns are with us. There's 300 million guns in America, and there's 100 gun deaths every day. And I don't know how many in Chicago. But again, this is an emotional situation, especially when it's at a school or something along those lines. But the focus needs to be on the shooter, and that's the point I'll make to Dave Graber. And we need to defend and uphold the Second Amendment and the 14th Amendment, which the red flag law of New York, which I'll talk about with him, which goes into effect in a few days, has absolutely trampled on Second Amendment rights. But worse than that, it has no due process. And no penalties if the disgruntled neighbor, the angry coworker, the spouse wants to blow somebody in and suggest they're unstable, come seize their guns. What's the penalty for a false accusation? In New York, there is none. And then how does that person get their guns back, as in 14th Amendment due process? There is no way to get them back in a timely fashion without spending a lot of money. And I'll bring that up because as bad as this is, I do go back to states' rights. And that's where I'll say the federal government does not belong in gun regulations, whether it's red flag laws, magazine capacity, expanded, what they call expanded background checks, which are all, none of that's focused where it should be on the shooter. But states' rights do matter, whether it's medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, all kinds of things from drinking age up and down the line. And I do believe in a smaller federal government as our founding fathers did. If New York's gonna do really stupid things, we do that every day. Don't forget, and I pointed this out, sometimes just, again, the sound bites that make a difference. 2 weeks after we signed a bill where we murder children born alive, we passed a law that you cannot declaw your cat because it's inhumane. I've shared that with some friends I have in California. They thought I was joking. I mean, honest to God. Not about killing babies born alive, because they do that in Virginia as well, but the fact that we think it's inhumane to declaw your cat at that same time. That's where this state has lost its mind. And we can argue things are unconstitutional or otherwise. New York State just keeps doing one dumb thing after another. I always use the soundbite, Cuomo is trying to out de Blasio. And that's not an easy thing to do. But boy, he's getting there. Now he wants to have our license plates designed after the Mario Cuomo Bridge. Can't make this stuff up. If that was the only bad thing he did, I'd actually say go for it, buddy. Yeah, I know, the M. I could think of some other letters. But the fact is, we know that the liberal left is coming after guns. They would like nothing more than, frankly, to outlaw guns, confiscate every gun in America. But you and I both know that wouldn't even stop these tragedies, any more than the ridiculous nature of limiting the number of guns in a magazine. Do you think the criminals pay attention to that? We know they don't. We also know you can outlaw extended magazines all day long. That doesn't prevent someone from having one that already exists, or putting 15 magazines in their backpack. But I'll tell you, the other point I make, and I do this because when I talk to people, sometimes I can actually get through to some pretty liberal groups, at least to make them pause. And the thing I bring up is, remember 2009 and 2010. In those 2 god-awful years, we had Barack Obama as president, Nancy Pelosi as speaker, and we had Harry Reid and Chuck Schumer, Harry Reid, as the Senate majority leader with 60 senators. We didn't even have filibuster power then. That's how we got Obamacare. But guess what they didn't do? They did no gun control. No. So I said, don't forget too, Schumer is a member of the House that authored the assault weapons ban, as he called it, the AR-15 ban, however many years earlier, that expired in 2004. 2009 and 10, they could have done anything they wanted. On immigration, they did nothing. On guns, thank God they didn't, but they did nothing. So the hypocrisy of this group of individuals, Schumer never reintroduced another assault weapons ban. Maybe he even understood it wasn't worth the paper it was written on to actually stop any kind of violence. Semi-automatic gun, pull the trigger, one bullet comes out. We've had them over 100 years, 200 million semi-automatic guns in America. And we all know too, and another talking point, happy place that I go to a lot, and it's a true statement. The Democrats politicize any and every tragedy to make their point. If there is a tragedy, they will attempt to politicize it. And a mass shooting is certainly forefront in that, until the mass shooting is done with a handgun. And if it's done with a handgun, they don't want to know anything about it. They won't even do a moment of silence on the House floor, because it wasn't an AR-15. And their suggestion to America, who's busy, is ban AR-15s, there won't be another mass shooting. Limit the number of bullets in a clip, there won't be another mass shooting. Have extended background checks, there won't be another mass shooting. And then you want to point out the tragedies that have occurred that have nothing to do with an AR-15. Tragedies that have occurred, in many cases, with folks who have had all the background checks, they've purchased their guns legally, or the situations where they just stole them. So if you can get somebody and you speak to them for a little bit, you can show them how politicized and ridiculous it is, some of these propositions, with this suggestion, there will never be another incident in the United States. But this is why, in many cases, I don't believe they did anything on guns or on immigration when they could have in 2009 and 10. They've even had the audacity, I think it was maybe even Chris Cuomo when I brought it up on CNN, he goes, that was a decade ago. And I said, and your point is what? These are the same people. You know, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters and Jerry Nadler, and don't make me go throw up in the corner here. But these are the same people. And it is disingenuous for you to make the claims you're making now, other than it's all about politics. And you and I know, starting 2 seconds after Hillary Clinton conceded at 3 a.m. in November, I can't believe it was that long ago, the attacks began. Mm-hmm. None of us wanted Obama. None of us voted for Obama. But we certainly didn't react the way the Trump haters have reacted. They did not give him 2 seconds, and they were after him. Yeah. And anyone associated with him, that's who these people are. And the country's paying a price. Now, I'll give you a piece of good news. Not a darn thing that Nancy Pelosi will ever pass, will ever be signed into law. Right. Ever. So that should at least give you comfort, because we will pass, not we, the House of Representatives will pass some more ridiculous legislation. Pelosi called back our Judiciary Committee specifically to draft gun legislation. Gun legislation, red flag, capacity, clip capacity, assault weapons ban, all of the above, number of bullets in a magazine, all of that's coming, and they may well pass it. They need 218 votes, they have 235. It is for their base, many of whom don't think through the real issues, an emotional thing. So I wouldn't be too surprised if they do. It's going nowhere in the Senate. It's not going to get signed into law by Trump. So when you see the liberal press talk about things they've already passed, as one update that indicates how ineffective she's been, and by the way, we were the most effective Congress in history when in 2017 and 18. Well, now the Democrats have control of the House. We got Pelosi there. She has not had one bill, other than the post office, signed into law. Not one, of any consequence. People go, whoa, what about that $4.5 billion supplemental for funding at the border? And I go, the reason we got that funding is because for once, and the one and only time, her moderates, she has about 35 or 40 actual blue dog kind of moderates, 31 of whom were elected in districts that Donald Trump carried in 2016. And those members are running scared, the Democrats, because this election is going to be about Trump, and there's going to be a different voter turnout. They finally said to Pelosi, enough's enough. We are not going to support your supplemental that addresses abortion, it addresses guns, it addresses the wall, it addresses, I mean, you name it, it was in a supplemental for the border funding. The Senate, under Mitch McConnell, had passed a resolution, a law, 92-6. I mean, even Schumer was on board. I mean, 92-6, it was as good as it gets. It did not block Trump from, redirecting funds from other accounts to do the wall. It was all about getting some money down there for housing, for judges, et cetera, et cetera. Granted, not specifically for the wall, but it also didn't didn't have a poison pill in it. She had to put that on the House floor. She had no choice. She had to pull her bill. But she then, not too surprising, took to the microphone and lambasted that bill. She called that the worst piece of legislation she's ever had to put on the House floor. She regretted having to do it. It was a sad day in her role as Speaker. It passed with over 300 votes. And it's the only piece of significant legislation that has come out of her tenure as Speaker. But she rallied against it. Shouldn't be too surprised. But that's how ineffective she is, and that's the good news. Because you know what? Jerry Nadler's going to keep doing what he's doing on the judiciary with Trump, Maxine Waters. I doubt the balance of checkbooks can still be doing what she does on financial services. We got an Adam Schiff, who we know is all a liar. He had definite proof that Trump had collaborated with the Russians. How'd that work out?
Yeah.
But you go up and down the line, that's the only thing that's happening in DC now. It's a witch hunt, and we don't have control. Maybe America will wake up, especially in those 31 districts that Trump won, to realize these were all a bunch of bogus, pandering promises that these folks make. Oh, I'm going to work across the aisle. Oh, you did it. It may work in an election, it's not an ounce of truth, but now they're going to be held accountable. What did you accomplish? And the answer will have to be, we passed the supplemental. No, we didn't. A Republican bill. That's the only thing that passed this along. This is not going to change in the next year and a half. I always say to people, I am an optimist. I truly am an optimist who believes in this country and there. But I'm also a realist. And so somebody was just asking me about New York State, and I said, well, we may have 15 more years, but when you look at what the devastation in New York, and I'm a numbers guy, some other numbers just to remember. 50 years ago, yeah, it's a long time ago, we had 45 members of Congress. And Congress is divided up by population. That's how overwhelming New York's population was. In fact, I think when we had 45 members of Congress, Texas, California, and Florida, which are now the three largest states, had maybe 55 members. Today they have over 120, and we'll be down to 25. Think about that. When we had 45, Florida had 7. They're going to have 29, and we will have 25. We can't make this stuff up. But what's happened is every 10 years, we lost 2 or 3 members. The next 10 years, we lost another 2 or 3. So if you go back 50 years, we've lost well over 20 members. But people don't realize it's been that kind of slow erosion. Now make it even worse for you. When we had 45, 31 were from upstate.
Wow.
31 of the 45 members of Congress represented upstate New York. We're going to be at 13. Meanwhile, the city had 14, now they're at 12. The impact in the city is next to nothing. But when you drive through some of our communities, Jamestown and other places that are ordered up, and now you realize the supermajority of the Senate and the Assembly and every elected New York State leader live in the 5 boroughs of Long Island. That's our reality check. And numbers. We have a $175 billion budget. Florida has more people than we do, and their budget is $70 billion. Honest to God, less than half.
Wow.
Less than half. I think we spend as much in Medicaid as they spend in their entire budget. And when you drive around in Florida, their roads are in good shape. They have good schools. I will tell you, we have some that are better, but then we have the city of Buffalo and a few other places which are way worse than any school in Florida. They don't have an income tax, and they don't have a state tax. So where do the wealthy end up? 7 and 5, 7 months in Florida, you love Western New York, 5 months in Western New York, you don't pay income tax, and you don't have an estate tax. You would say any person of means that doesn't do that's foolish, especially once they retire. But New York State is not getting better. The Assembly and the Senate and the statewide elected leaders, we've got Cuomo trying to out de Blasio. We're just going to keep sliding. And that's a crying shame. And I like to say to the governor, it's not the weather, governor. It is not the weather. We have great weather. I was just up at the air base, and one of the reasons we're doing well at the air base is because our weather doesn't shut things down. We don't have hurricanes. We don't have tornadoes. We don't have forest fires. And so when they look at a mission or another thing that they're flying, we've got a better location than almost anyone. So that's why, again, the base is all but bracket-proof. They're doing some great things there. The other thing, when you do what I do, you travel all day long. I spend all day long traveling. In fact, I had beet juice on my shirt. I was in the bathroom at White Rock. I was at the Center for Foods. Actually having to taste quality control their beets at about 5 o'clock this afternoon. It was kind of different, but that's the kind of things I do. But sometimes I actually have time to worry about things that other people don't. And we all know many of us are baby boomers. We're the evil generation. We're the ones that spent money we didn't have. We keep spending money we don't have. We're the ones that are to blame for the financial straits of this country. Let's just call it out for what it is. We are. But then we were followed by the Generation X, and we got the millennials, and we got the Generation Z, or the baby boomers, I should say, and then on down. But the new babies being born now that are under age 3, their generation has not yet been named. So again, we have the millennials, we have Generation Z, and then we have Generation Screwed. So if you want to know what this next generation's called, that's the name. Things are going to cave in maybe 15 years, but not in 4, 6, 8, or 10. Whether it's Social Security Trust Fund, Medicare Trust Fund, debt to GDP, yellow light will be flashing, then the red light, and you can look around. It's not coming tomorrow, and it's not coming in the next 10 years. And if you bring that up to most elected officials, what are they going to say? They're going to say, oh good, it's 5 elections. I'm glad to hear that. But that is a mindset. Now when it hits, it's going to be catastrophic. And whether it's Social Security or some of the other things. But right now, in our capital, we're not even talking about deficits and debt ceiling. They just put the debt ceiling on automatic for the next 2 years until July of 2021. We will not vote on increasing the debt ceiling. Now some would argue, well, that kind of makes sense. You've decided to spend the money, and you've spent the money, and you don't have the money. What do you got to do? Duh, you got to borrow it. So to then make someone vote on borrowing the money that they spent that they didn't have, you have to admit that it is kind of ridiculous. The argument should be, why are we spending what we're spending? So, not to bore you, but here's some numbers now that should make Generation Screwed, if they were able to take notice. Our budget right now is going to be, give or take, is it $3.5 trillion? I'm not 100% sure. Here's my point. 100% of our revenue, every dollar of revenue from whatever source, is spent on our mandated programs. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, Pell Grants. In other words, things that if you qualify, you get the benefit, whether we have any money or not. That's 100% of our revenue. That means that our discretionary budget, $1.3 trillion, which is half defense, make about 60% defense, 40% everything else, it's all borrowed. And that's adding $1.3 trillion a year to our debt that's already $21 trillion. And that's why if the economy at least keeps growing, God forbid if it doesn't, you hit that absolute red light in about 10 or 12 years. But unfortunately, we can still meander along. Now, as much as people want to jam Congress for what we spend on discretionary programs, we are actually spending less in 2020 than we spent in 2010. Congress, as bad as they are, has actually held the line on discretionary spending, and we have rebuilt the military. What Obama did to our military was disgraceful. We couldn't fly airplanes. The aircraft were not flyable. The pilots were not ready to fly. We were not building new ships. This country was in a very dangerous place after 8 years of Barack Obama. And after just 2.5 years of President Trump, we're back. Do we still have a ways to go? You're darn right we do. But all of a sudden now, we've given a raise to our military. They deserve it. We've fixed the VA to the extent that we have a choice program that brings competition to the VA, and I've heard a lot of good, it's going in a good direction. But all of a sudden now we've got some new programs. But the other thing I found out the other day, which every once in a while you want to look for some good news, we say the military squanders every penny. We all know that's not true. But the Secretary of the Air Force, I was actually with her the day that she announced that they were going to kickstart a new aircraft called the F-15X. The F-15X stunned the military complex. because everyone said all of the new planes will be F-35s, replacing the F-15 with F-35s. Problem is, all the infrastructure that supports the F-15s won't support the F-35s. So whether it's the fueling or whatever the maintenance is and everything else, God bless them, they said, not every mission needs an F-35. The F-15X, EX, will have upgraded avionics and capacity, but it can utilize existing infrastructure, and it's less expensive. So looking out for the taxpayers and saying, there's other things we want to do, especially in the space arena. And that was a smart move, but I can tell you, it upended the military complex from the standpoint they all wanted just all brand new F-35s. So, just a point, the government doesn't waste every cent, but we're stuck in a really bad place. When 100% of our discretionary budget, by the way, we don't vote on the other thing. The only budget we vote on is discretionary, and it's military and non-military. And the other thing I remind people is sometimes they think it may be more lopsided. Roughly 80% of that discretionary budget, maybe 55 or 60 is defense. But the rest, we're not talking 80% of the number, is other police enforcement, law enforcement related. You have Homeland Security, you've got the FBI, you've got the Department of Justice, you've got a lot of things, support for our local police and the like, that are in that mix. So when you look at our $1.3 trillion of discretionary spending, almost 80% of it is doing something to keep our country and our streets safe. So on a relative basis, I'm not speaking of Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security rate. It's maybe not as bad as some people think, because you need that hard numbers. So all I can tell you is I do my best every day, fighting against the craziness in DC. I'm the only member from New York with an NRA A+ rating. You get the plus by actually sponsoring legislation. There's other members who have good voting records, don't get me wrong. But I sponsor 2 pieces of legislation. One is the SAGA Act that all of you know about, the Second Amendment Guarantee Act. Some of your folks helped us write that. And that is a case which very specifically says a state cannot pass gun laws anything more or greater than what exists at the federal level. And there aren't that many at the federal level, so that would undo our Second Amendment. The other one is the right of an individual gun owner, if they're involved in a bankruptcy, they keep their guns. Think about it. You go bankrupt, you have fallen on hard financial times, but you want to keep yourself, your neighbors, and your loved ones safe. You all know that matters. They come and take away your guns. This is not right. So my legislation would say, irrespective of your financial plight, in bankruptcy, you can keep your guns. I think that's a good common sense piece of legislation. But because I've taken the lead on those 2, I get the plus. I said, well, I've done 2 of them. Can I get plus? A plus? But a lot of times, if you peel it back and bring it back to common sense, and in my case, I call it a happy place, because when they're attacking me on TV or other places, you need to be, if you don't, you need to be confident, you need to be educated, you need to be factual, again, whether it's Lake Ontario or guns issues or other things. And so I always have the happy place I can come back to. Mine is pretty easy. The Constitution, the Second Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and states' rights. And I can swing back at that time and time again. And then deep dive things like, it's the shooter, it's not the gun. It's the drunk driver, it's not the car. I mean, that's a quick analogy. You know what? Even moms who are picketing, talking about gun control, will say, I hadn't quite thought about it like that. And in fact, I don't know that I've heard anyone else but me talk about that. But it doesn't silence some of the critics. So in New York State, we kind of are screwed. I'm not sure how we work out of something. I'm sure there's lawsuits and other things, but whether it was the SAFE Act or now SAFE Act 2 or now red flag laws that are all about confiscating our weapons, we can all stand up. We do. 158,000 Twitter followers. That helps. But I think that's just a general update of Washington. It's a general update that just sleep well at night, nothing Pelosi does, nothing is going to be signed into law. Let the talking heads, let their heads swivel around and around. It's not going to happen. And yet you're going to see the New York Times and CNN and MSNBC, God help us all, the Buffalo News, the DNC. The DNC sent me 4 questions to answer for an article. They were so biased. And they weren't even pretending. So our decision was ignore them. We're not going to answer them because we can't win. Let them just say Congressman Collins did not respond, because that's how deliberately misleading they were. And answering them would have just been a huge negative in their favor. They're not quite as bad, but the DNC is almost as bad as Buffalo News. So I guess that's my update. There's a couple of questions, and I'm sorry I can't fix New York State. Yes.
Congressman,